Hey, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us to the latest installment of MSP Business School. I'm Brian Doyle, and with me today, as always, I've got my co-hosts Rob Rogers and Tim McNeil from OSR Manage. Welcome, guys.
Welcome. Good to see you.
And I'm excited today because we have a very special guest joining us, Jay McBain from Forrester. Most of you in the channel probably already know of him or at least know of his work. We want to thank him personally. He included us, this little podcast that we do, in his 100-channel podcast to watch list. So, we certainly appreciate the recognition there. But our goal today was really to have Jay come on and tell us, a little bit about him and his backstory. And I'm sure some of you follow him on social media. So like myself, you probably feel like you know him pretty well, even though this is my first time having a chance to chat with him. And then the other thing is just kind of, how he feels the state of the industry is. We may have some questions and some thoughts there. And I'd love to get your thoughts, Jay, on how it feels. So welcome.
Oh, well, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited.
Beautiful, beautiful. So maybe, kick things off. And for those that don't know much about you, tell us a little about your backstory on how you found yourself into our lovely little industry.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been in the industry. I've been in the channel my entire career, which is 27 years. I got a chance to be a channel chief of IBM, a channel chief of Lenovo, moved on to Autotask. I got a chance to leave with the founder of Autotask and run a startup for about 6 or 7 years and raise a bunch of money and go through that fun. And now I get paid to wake up every morning and think about this industry and collect every data point I possibly can globally and try to make sense of it all, both to the big vendors, to the distributors, to the MSPs, everyone involved. I just get excited about it and how influence happens, who the most important people are and the things and the places. And the fact that I get paid for this is kind of cool.
Right away, the first thing that came to me, if you're a fan of Silicon Valley, that the show that was on TV, I think about that final episode where they were doing the postmortem 10 years later, and Monica's sitting in a chair going, yeah, I'm part of this think tank now. I just sit and, we think about the big things, as they're accusing her of being in the NSA, but that's awesome. If you can find a role where you get to just kind of sit back and soak in everything the industry has to offer and kind of give your opinion to it, I got to imagine that's an enjoyable day.
Super cool.
Bad day.
There's worse days, let's put it that way.
That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool.
So, Jay, you shared a little bit about your backstory, and a couple of things that I saw there is, obviously you came up through the big company, big channel initially. Love to hear a little bit about those experiences and what that was like for you. Then it sounds like you kind of flipped the risk a little bit and jumped into what was at least at one point in time a startup with Autotask, and then going up and starting up on your own and what those experiences feel like, because I think that kind of mirrors indirectly how the MSP model usually starts, right? You've got an owner who either worked in big corporate or worked for another provider out there. Some catalyst event drove them to hang out a flag and become their own independent owner. And from there, a lot of them become vendors like us guys. So, it's an interesting trajectory, and I'd love to get your input on, what was it like being part of kind of the initial channel back when you talked 27 years ago? Those were the heydays. That's where money was big in the industry. The events were really cool, and there was a lot of side projects at those events too.
Yeah, let me give you a kind of a short version of history, but I joined IBM literally a week after they almost didn't make payroll. Wow. And this was a company that was the biggest stock to own in the 70s and the 80s. It was a company that was going through today, like Apple and Facebook, everybody going through antitrust. IBM actually lost some of those court cases, and a lot of the laws that are on the books that are being tested against the big companies today were made in those days. Well, in 1993, I joined the first day, and Lou Gerstner became a new CEO kind of the same day. So we started on the same journey. And to my grandma, who held stock, complimented me for the great growth of IBM in that decade. I think it was more to do with Lou Gerstner, but one thing I realized quickly is I had 450,000 colleagues, and 99.9% of those colleagues were selling mainframes to banks. And my job was selling PCs to small and medium business customers. And I always felt kind of a little bit on the outer edge, the redheaded stepchild of, a big organization. Yeah. And when I talked about SMB, people's eyes glass over. When I talk about, PCs back in those days, people's eyes glass over. And it took a long time, and I never broke through at IBM. Like I never kind of got it. And it was going over to Lenovo, which is when I first got it. that no one knew who Lenovo was. They thought we were a Chinese pharmaceutical company. But the fact of the matter is, I learned quickly, and at the same time, I moved from Canada to the US, and I didn't know anybody in the US. And I started to look at this massive 500,000 VARs and all the moving parts. Mm-hmm. I just read The Tipping Point by Malcolm Gladwell and got all excited about the law of a few. And I tried to marry those two things together. Was my first piece of analysis, which is, what do people read? And back then there wasn't podcasts and there wasn't Clubhouse and Discord. It was more narrow. But once I got a chart, and it's over my shoulder still to this day, there's 54 magazines that people read. There's 24 associations that they're in. There's 150 events that they get invited to. There are all kinds of other things. Today, there's the top 100 podcasts, which this is absolutely one of the top 10. There are all kinds of things that are influential in the market. So I said, how do I kind of get, cut to the chase here? Because I can't cover all things to all people, especially in the United States, which is 10 times larger than Canada. If you want to know somebody in Winnipeg, I'm your guy. But now that I'm in the US, I know no one. So what I ended up doing just quickly is double clicking on every one of those logos. I wrote down every name, every person that was on every one of those magazines, every board member of CompTIA and every association, every speaker at every one of those 150 events. I wrote down everything, the vendor communities, the distributor communities, everything I could get my hands on, every consultant. And then guess what? I started scoring them. Hey, you're on the front cover of CRN, big magazine, you get 8 points. Hey, you just did a keynote at Channel Partners in front of 6,500 agents. Holy smoke, 8 points. You did an ASCII event at St. Louis, at a Holiday Inn with 100 people. Cool, 2 points. And on. And it was just a made up algorithm. But it was interesting as names back then started popping up more than others. Like Larry Walsh just started popping up at different places. Right? He started in this 2112 group. He's speaking here. He's on the magazine there. He sits on the board there. He started earning more points. So I ended up writing down 3,000 people's names, but in a spreadsheet. And when I actually got to count them all up, everybody got a score. And when I sorted by score, the first 100 people were orders of magnitude bigger than the next 2,900. And it was the law of a few. And back then, by the way, Larry Walsh came number one. And so I got a plane ticket and I went and found Larry Walsh. I think I bought him a bunch of vodka tonics that night. And he spent like hours with me. He gave me an MBA in the channel, from his eyes, 30 years of writing about it in, CRN and other magazines. But then he started talking about other people as well. And in the top 100, they talk about each other a lot. And so, Bob Gottgart was in that list, and Arnie Bellini was in that list, and Harry Bresvold was in the list, and Arlen Sorensen. One by one, I started getting through and getting my own mini MBAs. And once I got through about 20 people, and they started seeing this like pointy-haired kid from Canada talking to these bigwigs, the other 80 people on the list called me and said, what the heck? What's Lenovo doing here? We've never seen IBM. We've never seen a company like this making these kind of moves. And it ended up happening. I measured it. And those 100 people were highly influential. And when they said something, 1,000 people listened. And the net result, by the way, I had to go to Beijing and sit in front of the CEO for 8 straight hours and tell him how a farmer from the Midwest who ran a small little peer group could drive $10 million of business for a $5,000 sponsorship. How a guy who ran SMB Nation got up on stage and did jumping jacks and drove $10 million of Lenovo laptops. And in the end, in 6 months, I spent 150 grand in sponsorships, and we just closed $365 million of product.
That's amazing.
And so that was the time that Lenovo overtook Dell and HP to become number one in the world in PCs. And that was on the back of community. And that was the nut that I didn't crack for all my time at IBM. That research there took me to be an analyst today. It is just fascinating understanding who the movers and shakers, what the key influence levels are in our network, and how it all works.
It's amazing, how you say that, right? Because, I think we all, as people that are within the channel, there are this certain segment of names that you just see over and over, right? And a lot of folks go, how did they get there? And it really comes back down to doing exercises like you did to get that outreach. I don't think many have taken it to the level of 3,000. Kudos to you, but, certainly getting that dream, the 100 people that you want to network with and do it. And the whole concept of your network is your net worth and all those great sayings are critical. And when you talk about Lenovo, I'm smiling a little bit because I'm old enough to have gone through that whole cycle. I remember when Lenovo was split out and all the craziness. How do they take the ThinkPad away from IBM, right? And put it to this? And, what's this going to mean to the world? But when you think about it, Lenovo became a household name much faster than many products around it. You certainly didn't see Acer have that kind of growth or some of the other machines that came in and out. And that's an amazing concept how you did it. And then going one step further,
yeah. It doesn't. And what I want to say to everybody who's running an MSP or maybe running a small vendor, it doesn't need Fortune 500 level Super Bowl ads to make yourself a household name. I go back 8 years to the early days of Datto and Autotask. Robb Ray with a shoestring budget, really a community approach. And the day I redid the list in 2016, and Robb Ray was #1 on the list. Larry had dropped, because now 2112 is, and Channelnomics was, on its way.
Yeah.
Robb Ray, the year prior, when I did the list, spent 312 nights that year in a Marriott.
Yep.
Jeez.
And there wasn't an MSP I could find globally that hadn't had a beer with Robb.
Yes.
And so the day they went public and became worth $4.2 billion, I wrote a piece to try to track back that valuation to Autotask and to Datto and to Austin McCord, those early days with the team at these small trade shows and stuff like that, sitting behind a booth that they couldn't afford. And all of a sudden, this guy's now a billionaire building out universities in upstate New York. And the company's just off to the races. And they're worth 3 times more than their larger rival, ConnectWise. And ConnectWise will go public and get the same valuation. But the point of the matter is this was a community approach. They didn't have direct sales. It was 100% MSP. They didn't have like this direct marketing. There were no Super Bowl ads. And how much of the 4.2 billion goes to Robb and the team? I mean, he's got 8 great people that work with him. But that community approach created an enormous company. It was the first unicorn in Connecticut.
Yep.
And then it created an enormous company today that is, paying a lot of people's mortgages. And that was a grassroots success story. And now when I talk about Passportal, Connect Booster, you talk about ID Agent. I mean, I can go through 100 examples now of companies that have just spent very little dollars with very key visible people that have the magic of a Robb Ray, who are now these unicorns or, are nicely retired based on this approach. And again, it scales from the very small companies right to the large.
So, I mean, how would you put that to an MSP? Would you say that, it's more important to start doing networking groups and start doing more trade shows in their area and, be more vertical specific? Like, how would you translate that?
The first thing I always say is, as an MSP, you look back on your customer base. Stare at the companies that you serve today and break them down into 5 ways. Is there a certain type of buyer that you tend to do better with than others? Is there a certain industry or sub-industry that you do better? A mid-sized clinic with 50 doctors. Is there a certain geography? It's usually within 50 miles, but is there a spot that you seem to do better in? Number 4, sector size and segment. You're probably going to have customers of different sizes and from the flower shop to the, the government department. But in the end, the heat map will kind of coalesce around a type of customer, segment size or segment that you just really win more than you lose. And that's your sweet spot. And then number 5 is there's 250 types of tech products today. And there's no MSP that, even at the upper largest MSPs, that can cover it all.
Right.
Security has 7 layers. It has 17 layers below that. You need a team to really drive a security into your customer base. So when you multiply all that together, there's 35 million cells on that heat map. But once you darken in those circles of the places that you really have strength and you win more than you lose, that is what's the answer to the question. Now go back to what I did when I moved to the United States. Those customers, those mid-sized clinics in upstate New York, go to Buffalo and Rochester and Syracuse and Albany and all the other places in between. What do they read? How did they get smart? They're all on digital journeys. Mm-hmm. So what are they consuming along the way? What podcast do they listen to? What clubhouse room are they in? What Discord channel or what Reddit channel? What events are they going to? Is it a chamber of commerce? Is it a local, roadshow, ASCII type roadshow for mid-sized clinics? When they do fly to Vegas, what are they flying for? Is it HIMSS? Is it something else? Get a real feel for what they read and where they go. And that's going to answer, build your own little logo chart, because that's going to answer the next question. Double click on every single one of those. On average, your customer has 5 technical people in the room. It could be a digital agency now. It could be an accountant. It'll be an integrator. There's ISVs. There's 16 different kinds of companies now that are doing tech services of one type or another. So start to figure out who is influencing your particular type of buyer. And if you actually make partnerships with them, because you do different things, if you make partnerships with them, we know that, for example, when you walk into your customer again after the pandemic, the guest book, there's an 80% chance of everybody signing that guest book are in talking about technology. 81% of accountants, 78% of digital agencies, architects, legal, all the way down the list. Everybody's becoming a tech company. So 65% of software today is bought by line of business. It's not bought by IT. So the head of finance who's buying Sage or NetSuite or Dynamics, they're talking to people that are having a tech conversation that needs to be managed, measured, monitored, integrated, implemented, secured, compliant, continuity, disaster, all the list, the automation, that's all you, where the accountant's trying to get the financial software to do the taxation and other work that they do. The marketing buyer in many of your clients as an MSP is spending more on technology now than the CIO. And so who's in there selling the 8,000 marketing pieces of software? Yep. This is the kind of things you should be asking as an MSP and doing a little bit of this work. Who are the top 100 people? Who's the Larry Walsh or Rob Ray in your market? And do they know you? Or do they know enough to be dangerous? The 30-second elevator pitch of what makes you different and why you win. And then third, are they using their platform of 1,000 listeners to talk nicely about you? That's the goal in your own market. And that's how you grow.
Yeah. And if I can add in here, and you probably know about this too, Jay, Rand Fishkin, the former CEO of Moz, started a company called SparkToro. And the whole concept of SparkToro is just to do this first layer of it, which the work that Jay did manually, you can really go out now and say, hey, with my customer avatar, where do these people live? What do they read? What do they talk about? What forums are they in? And really help you get that piece cultivated. I think if you talk to most business coaches in our world, they're all talking about, hey, you got to find that circle of influence, like you were saying, Jay, that really can help drive relationships for you, especially when you don't have the marketing dollars that a Datto has behind them, and to really go out and do the shows you want to do all eventually.
And don't be intimidated by this. Like, if you can't afford that software, I mean, you definitely have a spreadsheet because you can get one for free. Yep. You might have a teenage kid that's sitting around moping around the house.
So you've been here.
I mean, pay them money, like minimum wage, but get them doing this work. Get them scouring LinkedIn, get them scouring all these digital websites, finding these speakers, finding this, build your network, but do it in a mechanical Turk kind of way. And make that part of your business plan. Make that part of your mission to broaden that network of influence that you have, because you're just not going to sell and market yourself directly, to grow at the level you want to grow at.
It's funny because we're managing salespeople all over the place, and we work with, or we talk with a lot of MSPs that they have salespeople on staff, and historically the salespeople in this industry they struggle. And I think it's because what you're saying is probably more for the owners to do, right? I'm assuming like there's a lot of strategy in there that the average salesperson maybe can't grasp. But on a lower level for a salesperson, it's equally as important to go out and figure out who those influencers are within your radius and grow your network so that you can drive business to that MSP. I mean, it's huge. I mean, that I look at the salespeople that are successful that we know around the country in this space that work for an MSP. You know, they're equal parts prospecting and networking. It's just the reality.
I would say, like, the piece of advice that comes out of this is you're exactly right. They're more community managers than they are salespeople. And I know of the thousands of vendors, there's 10,000 vendors that I actually count in this industry. And the ones that are the most successful have engineered their channel account managers to be more community managers, their salespeople to be more community managers. And that, as an MSP, you're not going to be able to maybe afford a Rob Ray at this point, but what are the skills that make somebody like that tick? You know, maybe it's not 312 days in a Marriott because everybody got on the list for something separate. It doesn't just mean you have to travel a lot, but everybody has their own way and success model. And if you can hire that right skill that really emerges and gets on the board of the Chamber of Commerce, gets into that speaking slot at that local roadshow for mid-sized clinics, really gets into that network of 100 people that are highly influential in that digital part of the journey, start getting mentioned in other people's ebooks, start getting on other people's podcasts, all that kind of stuff is a different skill set than see a bear, shoot a bear. It's not just grabbing an MQL and driving it to close. It's literally looking at the broader sense of every prospect you could ever possibly have. Your target addressable market size is in their vision, and they're all thinking about the layers in between and letting other people do the selling for them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sounds so simple, right? But it's tough to, it's tough for people to execute on that and really push the pedal to the metal, especially at the level that you have here, Jay, because to really analyze 3,000 people and try to figure out where they sit and live, and then, boil it down to that list of 100 and then go make contact. A lot of folks would give up a lot earlier than that. But if you're really looking to build a successful business, knowing who that customer is and then taking those types of steps are really what you need. And that's how you avoid some of the, again, we all talk about branding. We talk about it a lot here on this forum. It's tough to do branding when you do have that shoestring budget, but there are a lot of guerrilla marketing tactics that people forget about because they immediately measure themselves where they're not yet able to live, right? I mean, even myself as VCIO Toolbox and a relatively small vendor, the biggest challenge we have is we can't afford to go to all 3 big shows that happen in the fall as trade booths, but we can certainly show up there, bring some swag, and go make some friends and get into those conversations that really have meaning that happen usually in the evening, right?
And by the way, you only have 3 days. So one of the things that we did in our startup, by the way, how we got our first 150 clients, you can go to an event with 1,000 people and just, go around aimlessly. But if you target and do the pre-work necessary, knowing who the people are, like, for example, us, when we were building our channel software, we knew the sponsors were there, and we went on LinkedIn and cut off the 100 people that were too small for our software. And we figured out the 75 people that we needed to talk to. Yeah. And those hallway chats and those hotel lobby bar conversations were not by random. They were very much planned for. And out of the 75, we'd get 30 of them as, really strong conversations that turned into MQLs. And then 10 of those would turn into SQLs. One of them would turn into a win. And so we spent, $1,000 on hotel and flight. And every single time we walked home with $36,000 in recurring revenue. Yeah. And so we did that over and over and over again to the point where we had 150 clients. And it was just, and our board hated it because it wasn't repeatable. It's not how you build a really big company, but you can build a multi-billion-dollar company this way. So a lot of people kind of push it to the side and, event within the event, the pre-planning, all that, having your people walk around with LinkedIn printouts and stuff. That seems, so archaic. It's not. It's actually, and, I get to talk to Fortune 100 companies today that are making this mistake. Microsoft hasn't been at the grassroots in over a decade. No. You've got companies like Cisco that just hired my wife last week to go do this work. You've got companies like AWS and Google who are asking questions about this. It says, we can hire thousands of channel account managers and darken the sky with planes. Go tell me again about that Midwest farmer. And tell me about that peer group that got acquired by that other software company now. But go tell me about that. And when he says something nice about somebody, that turns into millions and millions of dollars of business. And it's really interesting.
Well, I mean, you just hit it right there. You always talk to an MSP and they always say the best business they get is through referrals. Well, the only way you're going to get referrals is by doing the legwork to broaden your network and get out in front of those people with the influence to make it.
Yeah. So we've quantified it now. So this digital or digital only journey that your customer is now on as an MSP, they're going to get to vendor selection in many cases now without talking to you, without talking to the vendor. They don't want to talk to sales. They don't want to fill out a marketing form with the correct information. Guess what happened 2 or 3 weeks ago? Google and Apple both got privacy religion. So now that all of our iPhones have been updated, do you know how many people have said yes to tracking in the last 3 weeks? 4. 96% of people want to be anonymous on the internet. And 96% of your buyers want to be anonymous right through that digital journey. And so they're doing everything in their power to avoid you. But the one thing we do know is they wrap themselves around 5 people on average, or companies, to make them smart enough and confident enough to make vendor selection. So the way you buy a car today, all the YouTube videos you watch, the neighbors you talk to, the social media, everything you do to get 365 kinds of cars, which is a real number, down to the bottom 3. And before you step on a dealership, you've configured the car, you've priced it, you've colored it, the invoice price, the back end rebates, more than the salesperson ever will. And then they sit you down for 8 hours to get you the deal.
Yeah.
That's the way our customers of our MSPs think. They're moving a digital into a physical world, and they kind of don't like it. So in this idea that all those elements of you buying the car and narrowing it down and actually making the decision you made, in the end, you'd pay $100 more for them just to deliver the car and give you the keys than have to sit through that, getting you the deal 8 hours. But in the MSP world, the same idea exists. Those 5 people, whether it's you or not, you have a seat at the table is fantastic. You're not always going to get a seat at the table, especially when it's a line of business or somebody else in having a conversation. Those 5 people are the most critical people to you, because if you can influence them, they don't do managed services. They don't do help desk. They don't do security. They don't do install, move, add changes. They don't roll white trucks into residential neighborhoods. They're not into that business. They're a digital agency doing creative work. So they're going to mention you early and often to say that, you can't roll this out and get it integrated and get it, secure and compliant and everything else without Larry. And so if you arm up these 5 people in every one of your market, opportunities, that's where you're going to get the word of mouth now. It's not the physical referral network. It's the digital journey mentioning early and often.
Yeah.
Completely different.
Yep. Yeah, I get that. That makes complete sense.
Wow. So, thank you, Jay. These were some really, really exciting and great insights, that I think will benefit all, whether they're part of the channel like the 3 of us, or, certainly an MSP out in the marketplace. Anything you'd like to kind of add and close with before we turn it to Tim for speed round?
Yeah, I mean, I would always focus my business on the future, and always take that moment, to go sit on a hill somewhere and think about, you're an entrepreneur, you started your business, you started it in one of the fastest growing industries. Tech is 5% of GDP. It'll be 10% of GDP by the end of the decade. But the other 90% of GDP is also becoming tech. It's not an industry anymore. It's a horizontal across everything. So in this world that every company becomes a tech company, you start to focus forward. Managed services is 20 years old. It's hit a little bit of a plateau. There's price compression. There's a lot of consolidation. There's websites set up to just manage the M&A and everything else that's going on every day. So the fact of the matter is managed services going to be as rich and viable of a business model in 10 years from now as it is today? And where are the places I could be building skills, building practices, and what's the finger on the pulse going forward? So, I would be watching automation, which is the #1 spending area in the world right now, given where we are in a pandemic. A company like UiPath grew 5,614% 2 years ago. Last year, 83% growth and went public and is worth $1 bajillion. If I'm not thinking about RPA, BPA, no code, low code, and getting on top of that opportunity. #2, the cloud acceleration. You've been asleep if you haven't seen Azure grow at 50, 50, 48, and 47 inside a pandemic. Google Cloud growing at 46. The head of AWS getting the big promotion to take over Jeff Bezos. If you're not lumping, if your business isn't growing by 50% year on year, you're not taking advantage of the opportunity there and the $5 multiplier that every one of those dollars kicks out. You're not reading those reports. You're not reading about Microsoft unlocking trillions of dollars. None of it's program dollars. You're not reading about Salesforce's $4.65, HubSpot's $5.80, Google Cloud's $5.32. If you're not reading those reports and figuring out where that 75% margin 5-time multiplier is, how you can ask a customer for $1, $2, or $3 for every dollar they buy of public cloud, I would be questioning, where you want to take your business. And number 3, this future of work, 20 to 30% of people are not going back to a cubicle. Work is now what you do, not where you go. This residential or remote topology was dealt a hand directly in favor of MSPs. Companies, 23% of them today outsource some or all of their IT. That number's back growing double digits again because they had trouble enough managing by cubicle. They have no way of rolling a truck into a neighborhood.
Yeah.
Why you don't want to do that either. You've got the tools to avoid doing that. The fact of the matter is more and more of them are outsourcing. Security has gone off the hook in terms of them being able to do them themselves. There's so many environments today around the future of work that will increase your business more than double digits, 20, 30%. All of SaaS today is at 30% growth, replicating those dollars. And then just think about your businesses themselves that you serve. Every industry, every customer is going through their own transformation. 76% of CEOs in every company, in every industry, in every geography, think that their current business model will be unrecognizable in 5 years. The people that make forklifts, the people that make peanut butter, the people that sell pharmaceuticals, it doesn't matter who your customer is, 76% of them are going through an end-of-life journey right now. And it's this idea of how to rethink their customer service, their customer experience, how to rethink e-commerce and marketplaces, how to rethink employee experience, partner experience, rethinking their business with them, because they're all becoming tech companies. You can be the tech company that they do it with. You can be the leader, the business leader, as they have to go through this digital transformation to survive. You're the one in the room that gets it. So those are the 4 biggest opportunities for the next decade. And if you're not building skills and repeatable practices and are in these conversations with the CEO of the companies that you're serving, you've got to go back and think about what you want to be doing 10 years from now.
Jay, before we close out, I do have a question on that last point you're making, because I think there's one critical thing that I'm seeing as being a flaw to the MSP makeup, but it's actually being those innovators that are willing to look at those new technologies and figuring out where they can insert themselves in order to grow their business. There's such a myopic view of the things that they do today and the way that they drive cloud. A lot of times I'm not seeing a lot of MSPs that are really looking at getting more involved with the analytics behind it, or getting more involved with the digital transformation, going beyond the scope of just moving assets that are sitting on site today to the cloud. Are you seeing the same kind of trend, and this is really regulated maybe to the top tier MSPs that are getting innovative like that out in the marketplace?
Yeah, it's shocking to me. I mean, for the MSPs that are highly automating their ConnectWise, Datto, Kaseya, SolarWave, whatever environment they're in, they are doing some wonderful RPA work themselves. It just isn't called RPA.
Yep.
The way that you're managing and driving margins and stuff like that by automating the most mundane things, the fact that you're not doing this as a service to your clients and charging 75% margins and thinking about yourself more as an Accenture in those projects is crazy to me, because other people are knocking on those doors right now. The fact that you're not eating up no code, low code environments, you don't have to go hire DevOps people and compete on those big salaries. Yeah. It's drag and drop today. So thinking about automation and cloud and all these different things we're talking about is within the grasp of an MSP. And these are big margin. We're not talking 17% average margin. We're talking 75.
Yeah.
So there definitely is opportunity here to rethink yourself through your customer and think about co-innovation, think about value creation, think about network effects differently than today. You're thinking of more linear. The other interesting thing about MSPs is every other company on the planet is now getting it. Cisco, Dell, HP, IBM, just jettisoned its services group. Every company in the client server era is coming into recurring revenue. They've gone all in 100% subscription consumption. They're going into your model instead of conforming you into their model.
Right.
And so when every piece of hardware, software, services, every piece of MTech, IoT, AI, automation, blockchain, quantum, drones, self-driving cars, AR, VR, I don't care what we're talking about, everything is recurring, 30 days forever. Every industry, every one of your customers is thinking, at least 76% of them are thinking about going this way. You are the business owner. You are the expert in running a recurring business. Again, the business consulting opportunities around this, and to help those vendors rethink how they service the entire lifetime customer journey. I mean, this couldn't be a more important time, like literally right now. This is going to go away in about a year or two, but right now is this critical intersection of the next decade.
Seize it before it goes away. That's the message there. And I have to, admit that it does get you thinking differently this whole half hour. And thank you so much for joining us here on this. Has got me thinking a little bit differently about those things that I'm towing the waters on personally. I'm sure Rob and Tim, you were feeling the same way. And how can we accelerate it and kind of look at the mindset? Having someone like yourself joining us today is really having a kind of that outside observer who analyzes all that we do, telling us, hey, here's what you might be doing wrong, or at least something you should be considering. Because we do, the industry tends to get in their little box, and you can focus just on what's in the 5 feet in front of you too often.
It's very true.
Awesome.
All right. Well, I think we're coming close to the end. Just like we do pretty much with everybody, we've got 5 quick questions that we ask. Just basically the first thing that comes to mind. First question is talk, text, or Teams?
Teams.
Teams. Okay. Music, movies, or TV?
Music.
Yeah, that's the norm. What age do you want to retire?
60.
Okay. Mac or Windows?
Mac.
Yeah.
I'm a guy that was at Windows for 17 years.
I love it.
The day I left Lenovo, I walked into an Apple store and bought one of everything they sold. That's a true story.
Just because.
Literally everything I own is now in the Apple closed environment.
If you could do anything outside of tech, what would it be?
Travel.
Okay, very cool. Anywhere specific? Just general all over, or?
I've taken my kids to 85 countries. We've got a trip planned to Antarctica as COVID starts to loosen up.
Wow.
And we're going to get a sailboat at age 60 and hit the 100 countries that we haven't seen.
Very cool.
Beautiful.
Very cool.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Of course, I'll work on that. I'll work on the sailboat as well. You can never retire anymore.
Yeah,
that's true.
You got to. We're all going to live to over 100. You've got to, keep your brain active, and there's so much to give. Maybe on a part-time basis back to this industry.
Yeah.
You've now officially joined into the most common answer.
Yeah.
Well, I'll never really quit working because it's more the stimulation.
You
than
tried
just
to
the money,
do the
right?
good thing there. Yeah. It all came back. It all came crashing back.
Awesome. Well, Rob, do you want to take us the rest of the way home?
Yeah, sure. So, Jay, we really appreciate you being here today. For anyone that's looking to get in touch with him, we will have his LinkedIn profile on the podcast with us. Also, this episode will be up on mspbusinessschool.com and anywhere you get your podcast. Jay, before we break away here, sir, you have any closing thoughts?
No, thank you so much for having me. It's just such an exciting time. And, every MSP I talk to, every vendor, every distributor, there's risk for all of us. I wrote for distributors, like our distributors, the future of distribution, which got me in a lot of trouble and cease and desist letters. But these are all things that need to be talked about. And as we all know, we've all gone through challenges, and we've all gone through, end of life, end of industry type of conversations, but it always creates 10 times the opportunity.
Yeah.
And this is just such an exciting time. And this is, for 40 years in this industry, this is the first major changeover in everything. Demographically, our customers are becoming millennials in the next 4 to 5 years. Almost every metric you could possibly look at, we're going through a complete changeover. And boy, what a wonderful time to relook at our business, relook at why we became entrepreneurs in the first place, and then rethink about that 5 or 10 year plan, personally and professionally. And I think there's enough data, and there's enough facts, and there's enough. The trains are on the tracks, and they're gaining enough speed that you can predict the future with pretty good accuracy over the next decade of where there's money to be made. And I would challenge everybody to take a moment away, go sit on that hill, go listen to the music, or do whatever you do to get into your own space, meditate, and go try to work in your own mind backwards on how to go and retire a billionaire.
Well said.
Beautiful.
Very cool.
Yeah. So as always, thanks very much, guys. We really appreciate it. And Jay, we'll talk to you soon, man. Thanks for joining us. This was fantastic.
Yeah, thanks for
All right,
coming
thank
out.
you.
Thanks for coming
Thanks,
out.
Jay. Appreciate it.